Hey guys, it's Francisco again. So for this lesson, we're going to learn about JavaScript functions. And essentially what functions do is they are an essential piece of program development because they containerize a certain logic and you can continuously use that function. So for example, if I wanted to, if I was going to name somebody or start create an account, I wouldn't go and manually write how many, create account for this user, create account for this user, create account for this user. I would write a function called create account, and then I would just plug in user, and that way I can continuously continue to create new accounts. And I'll give you an example of how that works. So what we'll do is we'll go to our handy dandy development environment, and I have this JavaScript file called functions.js. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a function. So we're going to call this one create user. And how we're going to start. So you're going to type in function. That's going to be your first one. So you're declaring a function. And this is the name of the function. And then we'll do the parentheses. And we'll put in the squigglies, which is two curly brackets. And whatever is inside the curly brackets essentially is the code that you're executing. So for this, I'm going to do console.log, and I'm going to put user has been created. And if I save it, and if I run this function, so if I run function.js, I'll have to do node. Nothing happens because essentially I'm just declaring a function. I'm not really doing anything. To execute a function, what you do is you call the function by the name, and then you just type in the two parentheses, and well, it's gonna do that, but you're just gonna do node. It's gonna say user has been created. So once I run that JavaScript file with node, I'll see that the user has been created. So you don't have to put this semicolon. It's usually the old school way to do it, just to put the semicolon, but I like to keep it that way. Unfortunately, my linting hasn't been turned on, so I don't have my prettier file configured to avoid this. So just bear with me. There's many different ways that you can actually do this, but just so you can do this without the semicolon, or you can. All right, so let's go ahead and try another one. Let's do another one where user has logged in. And this is a really long name function, but essentially you can name the functions whatever you want. Just make sure that you name them something that is easily identifiable, so you know what you're actually doing when you're calling that function. Okay, so we're gonna do this. User has logged in. And if I just copy this over here, I'll run it. I'll see that it only runs the the function that I'm actually calling. So user has logged in is only running, and right for now we're not calling create user. Okay, so that's essentially how the function works. I'm gonna go into a little bit of the components now. So if we focus on user has logged in right now, again, we're calling a function and we're naming that function, and inside we have the parameters, and it takes in arguments. So what you can do for here is I can type in user, and in here I can add the user, so I can actually feed in a user value here. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit more into the components of the function. So inside here inside the parentheses, we pull in arguments, and for here I have a parameter, and this parameter is called, or argument is called user. So in here I'm just going to feed in the user. So essentially inside the console.log I can actually split this, and when I split this string, I can join it together with another string. So if I pass in a value here, it will be tied in as a string. As we all know, or as we previously covered in the variables and operators, is that whenever you tie in a string and then you add it in JavaScript, essentially what it's going to do is just going to create a string. It's going to concatenate that entire string that you're trying to make. So let's go ahead and try it here. So user has logged in. I can still call it without an argument, and essentially I'll get a null value, so just it won't actually do anything noticeable. And if we do this, it'll just say user, oh, actually has undefined, has logged in. So undefined is one of those really strange values where it's either null. So if I hand in, it's an actual reserved, it's a reserved value. So I'll go ahead and type it in right here, and it's null. So null and undefined are essentially kind of the same thing, where this is like just kind of like a blank placeholder, and undefined means that there's really nothing there, you're missing a value. And in future lessons you'll see that we'll get undefined whenever we're trying to get certain values with APIs and whatnot, but we'll ignore this for now, and we'll actually type in a value, and we'll call this geez, what we'll call this one? Let's just call it Bob. Can't believe I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what name to call it. So the function has returned user has Bob logged in. Oops. I should have fixed this. Okay. So, and what we can do is we can kind of do this. And we'll do this again. User Bob has logged in. Cool. So what we can do here as well is we can pass in another argument, and for this one we can put the date, right? And you'll see where I'm going with this one. So essentially what we can do is we can also add the date here. And we'll just kind of do this here, and I'll just space this here. And usually dates kind of have like an encapsulation on them, so and if you're OCD, this is probably going to bug you. Okay. Good thing for the linter, it kind of just does its own thing. So, and if we put in user has logged in, so what I'll do is I'll run this function again, and I'll type in the date. So we'll do December 10th. Okay, hopefully that's the last interruption I have recording this. So essentially what we've done is we amended our user has logged in function, and we've added the date. So we're feeding in the date now, but the thing is we don't want to manually feed these values. We kind of want to have these values generated as we go, because I think that we're also going to need user here, and we're also going to need date. And this is a little bit hard for us to use, and there's a more efficient way to do this, and we're going to start it with this one. So we're going to create a function because we need a function for the date, because at this point if we're typing in date for both create user and user has logged in, we're kind of being redundant, and we want dry code. We don't want to continuously type in the same things over and over again. So what we'll do is we'll do this one called time function, and then we'll call this one timestamp. And what we'll do is return. So what return means is whenever you're calling this function, you're going to return the value. So essentially whenever you do timestamp, it's going to return a value. So what we're going to do is we're going to do date dot now. And this is one of those JavaScript built-in methods that is just going to return the server time. So your current time is going to be returned. So we'll kind of clear this out, and then we'll have user and date. Okay, cool. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set variables, and this is where we're going to piece everything together so far that we have learned. So we're going to do a var, which is going to be the date. And we're going to do another var, We want date lowercase, and we're going to do another var called user, and we're going to assign user. Oh, I'll stay consistent with it. Bob, and then we'll do another one called, and this one is going to be the timestamp. Okay, so I'm going to explain how this works here. So the function timestamp is going to return the value of date.now. Okay, so whenever we return the value of date.now, we want to assign it to the date variable because we're going to continuously use this variable. All right, so for here, we're going to type in user, and keep in mind that you can feed any value into this user argument here. You don't necessarily have to use a variable called user. I could actually call this he was number 1, and I can still feed it over, and you'll see that it works. And I hope you guys get this reference. And back to what I was gonna say about making this more efficient. Let's make this more efficient here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll change this over to backticks, and that's like that's the key before 1 on your computer. So it's like the tilde key. So you're gonna do backticks, and you're gonna type in user, and then to assign the variables, the arguments here, you're gonna do money sign and brackets here, and I'm just gonna type in user so I can reference that. User has logged in, was created, and we're going to want a timestamp, and usually timestamps always go on the far left. So what we'll do is we'll do this and timestamp here, and we'll do date. Okay, cool. So essentially, I'll do the same here, and I'll just replace this. And I want you guys to do that for yourself. And I'm not going to do this yet. I'll pause the video and then do it, and then we'll compare notes. And I'll just change this to has logged in. Cool. So if I run this, essentially I can type in he was number 1 to reference Bob, and date to reference our timestamp function, and I'll just copy this over, and then we'll have the user has logged in. So essentially, what is it going to tell me on the console.log, guys? It's going to tell me, looks like, so follow me, guys. All right, so I'll let you figure this out, and then I'll let you know what it's going to do. Okay, so it's going to first call create user here. And if we check this out, create user is going to get the value user, and the value is Bob, and then the time, which is a current time now, and it's going to display Bob with it's going to display current time within the brackets, and user Bob was created. Okay, the same thing is going to happen for user has logged in. Okay, so we can actually trace this function. So the thing is, I want you guys to make sure that you know what's going to happen before you execute this, okay? So keep that in mind, and I'm going to run this code. And we'll just ignore this. Go away. Awesome. So user Bob was created, and it gave us a timestamp, and user Bob has logged has logged in. Okay, so funny thing about this is like the universal time code. So this is like a not a universal, this is an epoch time. So essentially what it is, it's since like a certain date in 1970 something, how many seconds has passed since that time. So You can use really cool function libraries to kind of simplify this into like an actual date, but I'm not going to go into this because this is beyond the scope of this current class that we're going through right now. Okay, so there's one more thing, and this is what I want you guys to do for homework, is that I want you guys to create your own function, but in a different way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this one. And with without this is not going to work. I'm going to get an error because I'm not declaring timestamp. I'm going to rewrite timestamp to this. Timestamp equals parameters pointer and return date.now. Okay, and I'll run this and it does the same thing because it's a function. It's just a different way of notating a function. This is a newer way to do so. So I want you guys to convert the other two functions into this notation. You can still do the same thing. So essentially, you're just omitting declaring this function and you're just using these as a shortcut to pretty much declare the function. There are some nuances to it, so it's not the exact same thing, but for our intents and purpose so far, it is the same thing for you guys right now at this moment. So go ahead and convert these two and let me know if it works for you guys. Post your questions on the comment section and hit me up on social media if you have any questions, if you can't really figure something out or if you're stuck. All right. So thank you guys for following through this. I will drop this as soon as it's done. Please excuse the bird squawking. We'll try to figure out how to not have that noise. But I think it's been a productive function class, and I hope we've actually you guys have actually kind of recognized this certain patterns and how certain building blocks work and have that crazy Lego mind stuff going up in your head. Because I remember the first time I kind of learned this stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And now it's just like, okay, functions do this, variables do that. You plug in variables into functions and you do all this other things in arrays. So next one up is I want to talk about arrays and the methods behind arrays. Usually they teach you variables and all the other data types like arrays and objects. But I think if we don't know functions and how they work before we get into it, the methods are not going to make sense. Okay, so thank you guys again. I'll see you on the next one.